Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this absolutely beautiful spring evening today, or tonight. First, I'm just going to start with some introductions, and then we'll just jump right into it. First, my name is Matt Landahl, Superintendent of the Beacon City School District, and we're here tonight to talk about two things. The proposed capital project that we're calling the 2024 capital project. And then also that will be the bulk of tonight. I'm thinking that part is about 20 to 30 minutes. And then we will do an update on the proposed budget as well and where we stand with that. But joining me tonight on the panel is our Deputy Superintendent, Anne-Marie Corderoni. Thanks for joining us. Our Director of Facilities, Jesse Morrill, and our capital project consultant, who's helping us with our current project and also with this proposed one, Perry Sheldon. And so, Mike at Amtrak, thanks for being here for our technical support. And Mike, I'm wondering if you could put the capital project slides up. Perfect. All right. So we'll hit the next slide, talk about for this part, the goals. So our goals for this part of the presentation tonight are just to do a quick check in on the current capital project that was approved 3 years ago, and a lot of work will be happening this summer. We're going to kind of briefly talk about that, and then we're going to talk about the proposed project. And we have a lot of information on our website. If you haven't seen it, there's two really clear links to all the board presentations. What's nice about tonight is Jesse and Perry are joining us to get a little bit more technical than maybe I'm capable of. So we're excited about that. And also just for the people watching, there is a Q&A function. I'm not going to look at it every single second, but we will look at the questions that come in and try to answer them. If you feel, and I'll say this again in the middle and at the end, if you feel like a question's not being answered, you can always just email me and I will do my best to get you an answer. Okay. All right, so next slide. All right, so we have some capital work happening this summer, 2024, right? Most of it happening right after our school year ends. So I'm just going to quickly go through. We have a lot of stuff happening at all of our schools. I'm not going to read every single thing on these slides. But at the high school, we have 2 science class upgrades. We're doing some upgrades to our TV media studio. And want to point out that the track at Hammond Field is being completely refurbished. And that work, we're going to put out some notices about that in the next couple of days. That work is actually going to start on May 20th and will go through the summer and be done for the return of the school year. We know a lot of the community uses the track, so we're going to make sure everybody is aware that it's getting redone this summer. But once it's open, the community will be able to continue to be able to use it, and it'll be in much better shape. So we're excited about that. At Roundabout, this summer, we're getting 2 science lab complete renovations, 2 art classroom complete renovations, some unit ventilator upgrades, and some corridor lighting and ceiling replacement, and partial roof replacement too. Next slide. At Sargent, the main thing is we are moving the Library Media Center to the first floor, and it's going to take over 2 existing classrooms. So they'll have a new Library Media Center at Forrestal, some parking lot upgrades, some HVAC unit ventilator upgrades, and new playground equipment. And so we're excited for that. The community will be able to access that outside of school time. We're excited about that. Next slide. And then at South Avenue, they're getting their front loop driveway and sidewalk redone. They're getting some new additional playground equipment, and they're getting some upgrades to lighting and ceiling, different corridors. At Glenham, they're getting some additional parking and some site work improvements, a new secure entryway. And then summer of 2025, they're getting some new unit ventilators in classrooms and new casework. So every single building is being impacted this summer, and then a little bit into summer of 2025. But a lot of it's internal work, but you'll see a lot of the parking lots and playgrounds and like the track being worked on. So there'll be a lot of visible work happening this summer as well. All right, on to the next slide. All right, so the new capital project. We wanted to first talk about how this came about, and I'll do some of the talking for this slide, and then I'll defer to my guests as well. We typically have waited in the past about 6 to 8 years between capital projects that go out to the voters. As you can tell, we're just reviewing a capital project that we're in the midst of right now, and so this is a shorter time frame. So some things went into this decision. So one is we're required to do a building condition survey by the state every 5 years. It looks at every aspect of our buildings and identifies areas of need. So a lot of the work we're proposing is driven by that. We have a very active facilities committee of the board that meets typically once a month, that reviews all of this, talks with staff, helps us make the plans, and we also get input from building leaders and building staff. But I'm going to throw this to Perry or Jesse, if you can just talk a little bit more about what goes into the building condition survey and how it impacted our thinking about this.
Sure. So again, it's every 5 year, it's a requirement. And basically it's conducted by professional architects and engineers, and they evaluate the building entirely, all the building systems, and give them grades from excellent to failed with multiple degrees in between. And they also identify what is the expected remaining useful life of that equipment. And the purpose of that is so districts can plan ahead, because these capital projects take sometimes many years to go from concept to work actually being conducted. So if that process is followed, the state shares the cost of these projects. If a district opts not to, follow the recommendations in the building condition survey, they may not be eligible for the state aid. Perry, do you have anything you want to add to that before we
Yeah,
move
I
to
would
the next
also.
slide?
I think that it would be good to recognize that there are many things identified in the building condition survey beyond what's being proposed in the next capital project. Only those items that are the highest priority and identified in the building condition survey are incorporated into this existing project. As part of the report that the architects and engineers produce, they start looking at longer range plans where you're looking at what might need to be done as a second priority or third priority. So it really is a planning process. And most districts now are looking at capital projects of greater frequency. Every 3-5 years, at some level of a capital project to maintain their buildings and upgrade.
So thank you. And just for the people joining us, I see some people have logged in. Matt Landahl, superintendent, and with me tonight is Jesse Morrill, our director of facilities. Perry Sheldon is our capital project consultant, and our deputy superintendent, Anne Corderoni. So the other thing I'll add to that is also just a sense of that we are struggling to keep up with the needs of our building with that slower pace of doing the projects. We recently, parents of South Avenue and staff of South Avenue know that we've had to close the gym there for the last few months due to some damage in the ceiling of the gym after a big winter storm. And so it's finally close to being done. I think in the next week or two, it should be done. It had a kind of a long approval process with the state that slowed us down a little bit, but that's just an example of we want to start being more proactive with our buildings in terms of modernizing them and keeping them in good shape for our students and staff. All right, next slide, please. And just so some of these things we're going to talk about in greater depth as we go through this presentation, but some of the programmatic upgrades or highlights of this new capital project, this is the one, again, that's going out to voters on May 21st, is many of our classrooms will receive new flooring, ceiling, lighting, windows, window treatments, and doors. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through the slides tonight. We're planning on doing some pretty significant upgrades to the theater at the theater and stage area at Beacon High School, the Seeger Theater, which is, as many of you know, heavily used by both our students and community groups. We're going to, you noticed with the current project we're in, we're adding playground equipment to Forrestal and South Avenue. We want to add playground equipment at Sargent and Glenham. Playground equipment comes at a huge cost. It's important to keep it safe for our students and also exciting and fun. So we're excited to be keeping that process going. And then we want to do upgrades to the tennis courts at Beacon High School and to the baseball and softball fields. Tennis courts really just need a redo, kind of like the track that's happening this summer. Our baseball and softball fields really have a lot of issues with drainage, so we want to try to tackle the drainage issue there, either with working on drainage, doing like a smaller turf infield with either or both of the fields, something that makes those fields more playable. And then lastly, we want to add cooling centers in the cafeterias and gyms in our 4 elementary schools and the middle school. Our high school currently has air conditioning. This project will help upgrade that, but we really need to take a step in adding some cooling centers with air conditioning in our other buildings. This current school year that we're in, the first week of school began with very high temperatures, and so we feel like this is a step towards making those buildings better for our staff and students. So the next slides, we're going to talk about kind of the key components of this project. And so Jesse and Perry are going to kind of take over a little bit more at this and just get into some of the things we're looking at for this project, and then we'll sort of go from there. So next slide, please.
Yeah, so when we reviewed all the items that were identified in the building condition survey that would need attention in the near future, we decided to it became apparent we had to prioritize. We couldn't do everything all at once. So what we did is looked at all the items and broke out those things that would be the most impactful on the occupancy of the building. In other words, if the items would fall into this category, if they should fail, it could make the building unable to be occupied. So we put things in there like heating systems, ventilation systems, and upgrades to electrical and plumbing systems. Next slide.
So then we also looking at building envelope, and as we all do in maintaining our homes, we've always got to replace the roofing, siding, windows, doors, and that's really what the meat of this meat and potatoes of this project is really all about: building systems, maintaining our infrastructure, keeping our buildings secure and serviceable. And as Jesse was talking about with the critical building systems, we also look at that as a building envelope. It's important for us to keep the weather out of our buildings. It influences indoor air quality. And you'll see in these slides, there's a lot of the same critical elements happening where we're talking about indoor air quality, space comfort, energy performance, maintainability, serviceability. Pretty much everything that is being proposed in this project is focusing in that direction. Next slide.
So our ADA compliance issues are just targeted to create a more usable building for everyone. Our asbestos abatement work, for many years, asbestos was widely used in many different building materials, and it can be safely managed in place. However, when the material becomes deteriorated and starts to degrade, hazards can present. If we are able to anticipate, we can have the material removed when we can control the process. If it should fail or deteriorate in the middle of a school year, the cost to deal with that is much higher, and it can be very disruptive. And then our what we're referring to here is in our DEC compliance is our bulk petroleum storage, or our fuel tanks. We do have one in particular that's very near the end of life. Addressing it before you have an issue is certainly preferred. Petroleum spills are extremely costly to clean up, and the DEC will certainly fine another government agency if we neglect to be diligent about our petroleum bulk storage management. Next slide.
So also in this project, we're looking at safety and security items as well as a priority. As you may know, at Glenham Elementary School this summer, we're going to be upgrading and constructing a new visitors vestibule, which will improve the visitor vetting as they approach the building. We're looking at doing, and I'm not suggesting that we may be doing that to every building in quite the same way, but we're looking at how we handle visitors at each one of those buildings and plan to make improvements to the way that process works. Currently, visitors all too often are allowed too far into the building before they've been vetted. So we want to try to improve that solution going forward. Also looking at fire alarms and PA systems. Many of these systems are far beyond their original intended life. And these are critical systems. Obviously, fire alarm systems, everybody recognizes the value of that. PA systems are critical throughout the day for the safe movement of students through the building, or in the case of an emergency, notification going out. As our upgrading of the emergency lighting. There's been a lot of changes in emergency lighting technology in the last decade. Much of the emergency lighting that we have is, again, beyond its life. We find that trying to maintain that equipment becomes expensive, particularly in fire alarms in particular. We have smoke heads throughout the building that are costing anywhere from $500 to $600 each to replace, whereas newer heads may only be a few $100s each. So there's that older technology is becoming very expensive to maintain. Interior and exterior doors, again, from a security standpoint, they're your first line of defense at the entrance to the buildings. Many of the buildings have newer doors on the exterior. There's still a few exterior doors that need to be replaced. And we have many older interior doors, classroom doors, particularly hardware and what it takes in order to secure that door in the event of emergency, and just maintaining it from a usability. So those rise to be a priority that we identified in this project. Next slide.
So these elements all together contribute to a more comfortable and energy efficient building. Upgrading to LED lighting uses far less electricity than older style lighting. When a roof is replaced now, part of a code requirement is that you increase the insulation of the roof, which is where most of your heat loss occurs. Just upgrading windows and doors, can make the building less drafty in the cold months, and window treatments in the summertime can do a lot to decrease the heat buildup from the sun throughout the day. So, not one of these things alone makes an enormous difference, but added together, it does improve the energy efficiency of our buildings. Next slide.
I would just add one point is that, this project really is focused on the infrastructure and the, maintaining the buildings. It does have a lot of things in it that are going to make the spaces more enjoyable to be in for teaching and learning to go on. I think we're going to see some classrooms that are going to be, greatly upgraded with windows, lighting, ceilings, flooring. But I think you have to look at this project as being one that is really about supporting the buildings and infrastructure for the future. This is a good start. There's will still be more to be done, but I think this is a good investment in the future of the district's buildings and infrastructure.
So just in terms of the schedule, the vote, this is part of the regular, it will be a proposition on the ballot for May 21st when people are voting on new school board members and the school budget. So May 21st is the vote. The actual work would take place the summers of 2026, 27, and 28. I've been meeting with PTOs and then having these community meetings. So this is a virtual meeting tonight. And then we have a meeting on May 2nd at Beacon Rec at 6 o'clock. It is all on the website, so I'll make sure I'm right. And then May 6th, we have a community meeting at Howland Library at 4:30. And then May 7th is our Beacon School District's Board of Education has their public hearing on the budget, which will review all of this, and public can comment on that as well. Next slide.
So this chart that we created was to try to give you an idea of what the tax impact would be for this capital project. So we used assessment values at 3 different levels: 300,000, 400,000, 500,000. And then whether or not you receive STAR directly or STAR comes off your tax bill. But for the most part, if you have a house, I'll use the medium of about $400,000, you would be paying anywhere between $134 and $170 per year. 500,000 would be a little bit less. And the reason this is really important is because this is a really economical way to get these repairs done through a capital project. We get aid differently. We get what's called building aid. It's over 65% reimbursement from the state. So it actually allows us to do a lot of the work that both Jesse and Perry spoke about without it being part of the general fund budget, which is what you vote on in May. We wouldn't be able to do all of these things, and we wouldn't get additional state aid. So this is the reason for the project and a really economical way to get this all completed. Next slide, please.
Sorry, I was on mute. The way the Q&A function works on the webinar, it's at the bottom of the screen. It says Q&A. If you want to ask a question for this part, you could do it at any point. But if you want to ask it now, I've been sort of peeking at it as we go. I haven't seen anything. If you have a question, you can type it in. I think you can also type it in anonymously if you want to do that. And while Perry and Jesse are on, we can try to answer it. Or always, you can email me later with questions, and I'll do my best to get the answers to you. And before we switch over to the school budget part and say goodbye to Perry and Jesse, just want to open it up for questions. So I am just going to take a peek here. If you have one, you can type it in. But, just if you're pondering asking a question, I'm just going to kind of talk for a minute. Like we said, this project is really helping the infrastructure of our buildings, helping modernize our buildings. We think some of the programmatic upgrades are also going to be really important with this. And we need our buildings in good condition to do all the things that we want to do. So we're excited to put this before you and have it be part of the vote on May 21st. So I'm not seeing any questions come in. Mike, if you could switch to the budget presentation. And so, yes, you know, I haven't done a webinar in a while, but I did a lot of these during the more COVID era of the district. And when I do one on my own, I usually mess something up. And when I just want to say thanks for Mike for helping. Like maybe my skills just really need an upgrade, but I always need help when I do one of these. So, all right. So we are going to switch gears and do, we're going to switch gears and talk about the district budget. But we do have a question that came in, and this may be a way to kick things off. And it's less about facilities, but Anne Marie, maybe really more towards you. Someone has a hard time understanding the difference between the general fund and what we're asking voters to vote on. So I know we're going to get into detail about that as we go through this presentation, but like, could you just give an overview of
Sure.
just quickly, like the different things since the question just came in?
Sure. And I know it is a little confusing. So when I mentioned the general fund, that's the general operating budget that you vote on every May. So that would be Proposition 1 on the May 21st ballot. So that's all the expenses relating to running the school district, paying teachers' salaries, paying benefits, materials and supplies, classroom supplies. So that's part of the budget. The capital project is separate because we account for it differently because we get a different revenue source of building aid. So that's why it's a separate proposition. There are some things in the general fund budget that relate to facilities, but nothing on the scale of what is included in the capital project. So that's why there'll be a different yes, no vote as a proposition on the May ballot. I hope that helps.
And just to add, a lot of times in the past, Beacon has done capital project votes separately from the May vote. A lot of districts do it separately. The timing of this project, it made sense for us to do it in May along with all of the other things that we're voting on. And we're going to go through those things in these slides over the next few minutes. But part of the reason is it costs a fair amount of money to run an election. And so we didn't want to have two really close together. We decided to put it all in one. But, you know, in this presentation, we're just going to kind of go through what will be on the ballot on May 21st. We also will be putting more stuff up on our website, and we also will be sending a mailer out that should come about a week before the election that will have all the information about what people can vote on as well. So that said, we're going to just take a few minutes to talk about our 24-25 budget proposal and talk about what's going to be on the ballot. So next slide, please. So, about 3 years ago, we worked on developing a mission and vision and belief statements. And my main point with this slide is just that we really try to have our beliefs drive our budget decisions. And we've made many of those over the last several years that I'm going to talk about with these next slides. So I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. There's just some highlights of things we've accomplished through our budget and the work of our staff and our families and our students over the last few years. Next slide. First is this is an example of our strategic planning work. So we've had a lot of professional development. This past year, we've had a lot more family engagement events. We've really grown our extracurricular clubs, and some of these were in place, but some of these are new. We have some higher ed partnerships. We're excited about the DCC one. Has been in place for a long time, but we have a new one with Marist about developing new teachers. Mount St. Mary College, they're going to be one of their classes offered at Beacon High School next year in terms of learning to be a teacher. And then BARD, we have just a handful of our students attending the BARD pre-college thing that's at Duchess Bosse's. Next slide. So some of the things we're excited about, and again, I'll go through this quickly, but I'm super proud of this. Our budget supports a four-year graduation rate of 90%. That's one of the best in Dutchess County. Next slide. Our budget supports full-day pre-K and a special class integrated setting. We offer more full-day pre-K in-house than any district in Dutchess, and we're proud of that. Next slide. Our budget supports small class sizes, K through 12. It's something that we've really worked on over the last few years. And so we can really say that we have good class sizes from our pre-K and K all the way through high school. Next slide. Our budget has supported a huge increase in extracurricular clubs, especially at the elementary school and the middle school. About 5 years ago, we maybe only had 1 or 2 clubs at the elementary level. Now we have at least a dozen or more at each of the elementary schools. The middle school has expanded their offerings. We really want students to find a way to connect with school beyond what's happening in the classroom. And so this growth in clubs and different opportunities for students to participate and find things that they really love doing, I think has really made a huge difference. Next slide. Our budget over the last several years has supported college and advanced coursework, both AP, our DCC classes. We're one of the first districts in the area to offer the African American Studies AP class, but you see the list on the slide. And this presentation these slides are on the website if you want to go back to them, because I know I'm going through them pretty quickly. And then we'll be adding, like I said, the class from Mount St. Mary that's on learning to be a teacher. And we're excited about that because we'd love for more of our students to enter the education world. Next slide. Our budget supports growth of our music program to very high levels of participation. We started a 4th grade instrumental music program through a grant several years ago, and we've been able to continue that through our budget. And now our high school concert band is the largest it's ever been. Our high school chorus is the largest it's ever been. So we're really proud to be supporting that. Next slide. And then our budget, and this is a huge part of our budget, supports salary and benefits to all of our employees. So we have about 570 employees in all of our different units. And we have worked hard and want to continue to work hard to be competitive in our hiring and what we offer our employees, so we can keep growing as a district. Next slide. So this we just have, and again, all these slides are on the website, but we wanted to point out, and this is just one way to look at it, but with all these things we're accomplishing, Beacon has one of the lower tax rates in Dutchess County. Next slide. That tax rate has been decreasing over the years. Next slide. And then so you know, I kind of go more in depth into this at the last few board meetings, and those are all online on the budget webpage. We had a board meeting last night, and the board kind of talked at length about this latest state budget. But the state finalized their budget on Saturday. We've been receiving information about it over the last few days. You may be aware of this, but Beacon, what it seemed like we were kind of heading to is that Beacon would be receiving a flat amount of foundation aid from the previous year. We actually received a slight decrease in foundation aid. This is a huge challenge to us. Our Board of Ed has been doing a lot of advocacy. A lot of people in the community have been doing a lot of advocacy to our governor and our elected officials about the needs here. About half of the districts in New York, so New York has about 700 school districts, about half were affected by this, like Beacon. So I think we're handling it well, and those things that I highlighted, we're going to be able to keep moving forward with. But this is a huge challenge. This decrease in foundation aid, which we haven't experienced, I don't think, in possibly about 15 years, I think, or more. But this decrease in foundation aid caused us to have about a $1.1 million budget gap that we've been working with other administrators and leaders in the district and the board and trying to close. So I go a little bit deeper into this, and there's recordings of the board meetings on our website, and the board does too, if you want to check that out. Next slide. So how we're adjusting to this change in state funding, and we've been trying to prepare for this for the last few months. We were holding out hope that there would be maybe more of a compromise coming out of Albany. So we were disappointed in the final result, but we're implementing position control. So we're looking at every position in the district in terms of, especially when someone resigns or retires, whether we need to replace that. So I don't want to say that to scare people. You know, we have various retirements happening and they're crucial positions. And so we're obviously replacing them, but we are looking at different things in terms of where can we scale back. Our main goal is that we're trying to not negatively impact the student experience. So we're looking at positions that don't maybe directly do that, but it's hard to, you know, fill that $1.1 million gap perfectly. But that's what we're looking at. We're also looking at our class size effort in areas where we can make adjustments and reduce positions that way while still keeping small class sizes. So we're working on that. So that is going to be ongoing, really. What we're learning from our different organizations is that, excuse me, that this effort at reducing foundation aid will take place over several years. So we're doing our best to try to prepare for the future as well. Obviously, our main focus right now is on this budget cycle, but we're already thinking about the next one too. So we're also looking at reducing some of our contractual services. A lot of that is through BOCES. It could be for professional development or other services that the district gets. It's just helping us, you know, things that we certainly help us, but we're looking for ways to reduce our spending there. And then we're also trying to seek grant opportunities. It's not a perfect replacement for something like foundation aid, but we are going to be going after both state grants and national grants to try to offer more to our students. So that is that's the update there. I'm just looking at the question box. I think I just answered the question that got typed in, but it said, did Beacon receive the state funding to support the school budget? So we did receive, you know, some state funding, but like I just said, we received a decrease in what we get from the state, whereas over the last, Anne Marie, I don't know if my year count is right, but over the last 15 years, we have always received an increase. We did not receive that this year. So we've been, you know, working on that. I think a lot of districts are in worse positions than us. I feel pretty good about where we are in terms of managing this. But you know, it is a challenge for sure. Next slide, please. So I'm going to Anne Marie just talk about this part.
Our budget number is really a reflection of the amount of money that we get from state aid and the tax cap. So we built our budget based upon that, and I'll explain the tax cap in a second. Next slide, please. So our revenue sources are twofold. One is state aid, which Matt had just talked about, that we had gotten just recently from the governor. The other is our tax cap, is our tax levy. And the levy is the amount of money that we spread over to the taxpayers through their tax bills. And it is capped by the state. And that's been like that for over 10 years. So our tax levy percent increase is 3.91%. That is at the cap. And some of the factors that affect the tax cap calculation. For Beacon, the tax base growth factor has been a positive in the last couple of years. What that does is it allows the levy to grow because of the growth in the community. And Beacon has been growing for many years. So that's allowed us to increase the levy by more than other Dutchess County school districts. CPI is Consumer Price Index. That's maxed at 2%. We know that our CPI is more than 2%, but that's 2% is in the calculation. A capital exclusion is basically your difference between your principal and interest and what we talked about before about building aid that you get for capital. You're allowed to increase the levy for the difference between the two. And ERS exclusion, if your pension, so ERS is Employees Retirement System, teachers have teachers retirement system. If the increase for those are more than 2%, you get an exclusion for that as well. So based on the calculation we submit to the controller's office, Beacon is allowed to raise the levy by 3.91%. Next slide, please. So we wanted to give you an estimate of what the tax impact would be based upon our 3 municipalities. So for Beacon, Fishkill, and Wappingers, the estimated tax rate per thousand, which is how we calculate the school taxes, would be about 1306 to 1312 based on the municipality. And what does that actually mean? So estimated tax increase based on the median home value, your taxes would increase for the school district budget between $88 and $106. I do want to say one thing. What we've been seeing is that each year more tax properties have entered the tax rolls. And when that happens, it increases the assessment value. But what it does is it allows us to spread the levy out over more properties. And what that generates is a lower tax rate, which is what we talked about before. And it could also talk about lower taxes per household if your assessment is the same. So we've been seeing that. We've been seeing the tax rate decreasing, and that's one of the major reasons, by having more properties in the communities and having the tax levy be spread over more properties, because the tax levy cannot increase because we have more properties. It is what it is. And we just, we try to maximize it each year to the cap, and then we spread it out over the properties in Beacon, Fishkill, and Wappingers. Next slide, please.
So this is just quickly, we're things that we're going to continue momentum with in this budget: funds for professional development for our staff, funds for a new pilot reading program at some of the grade levels at the elementary level. We're going to get more into detail at that at the May 7th board meeting, and then funds that support all of the extracurricular work we do. We're going to keep the momentum going with that. Next slide.
So we wanted to go through some of the propositions that would be on the ballot for May 21st. So as you remember last year, we asked you to vote on the purchase of an EV bus. And what we told the voters were that if we can get an EV bus for a maximum cost of $466,000, we needed a grant of $250,000. But what happened in a year is that the cost of the EV bus and the level 3 charger increased to $495,000. So in order for us to purchase the bus, we need to ask the voters to change the numbers piece, and also ask them to buy an additional bus. So 2 in total. So 2 EV buses in total would be what we could manage at the bus garage currently without doing any upgrades to electricity or any facility upgrades. What it does to, we do have a mandate to be totally electric buses by 2035. That was not changed in the state budget this year. So we have to start moving closer to that deadline. The good news in this is that in anticipation of going out to the voters again for the change in the numbers and the additional EV bus, we applied to New York School Bus Incentive Voucher, and we received $257,250 for each bus. So we were awarded this. We have between now and July 2025 to actually purchase the EV bus if the proposition were to pass in May, on May 21st. Next
so
slide.
I just want to jump in on that and just thank all the folks in the district that worked to get that grant. We obviously still have to get voter approval for it, but the board was really clear with us, and it made sense to us as well that we should go after this, but we should go after it with grants offsetting the cost. So we found that, and we're able to do that, and so we're excited to bring that to voters on May 21st too.
And this slide just basically, again, summarizes what Proposition 2 will look like. And it will be to amend the language from the proposition from last year, and also ask you to buy a second electric bus. Next slide, please.
I have a question that came in. Which school will use the 2 EV buses? So they'll be used across the district. when you make this transition, we've been really studying this, and I think we would start with very local routes. Obviously, we wouldn't be doing long field trips and stuff like that with these buses. So we would start with the routes that make sense to do this. But so it would be something we figure out as we're going through the purchase process if voters approve it. But it would be something that wouldn't be school based. It would be part of the district fleet. So.
Okay. Proposition 3 will be a bus proposition to purchase 372 passenger gas vehicles. And why we're asking for this. So the mandate to be totally EV buses is not till 2035. We do have some buses that are nearing their end of life. We maintain them in-house. We have some great mechanics that keep them running. And our drivers do a good job of keeping them, clean and every day after routes. But we do need to purchase 3 additional 72 passenger buses to get kids to and from school safely, and also to do field trips and sports trips. The important piece to this is that our district receives not quite 60% of transportation aid spread out over 5 years. So what we normally do is when we purchase buses, we finance them over 5 years to match the state aid so that the tax impact is not great. But we are in need of also 372 passenger buses as well. So you'll see that on Proposition 3.
And Anne-Marie, I have a question for you.
Sure.
And I'm asking you because I should be able to rattle this off and I can't. How many total buses does the school district have? Do you know the answer off the top of your head?
Yeah, throw me a hard question.
It's a question from the audience.
Oh, it's a question from the audience. Okay.
Yes.
I believe we have between 45 and 55 buses, maybe 60. So
yeah, actually, Anne-Marie,
yes.
I'm still here, and I have that information. We run somewhere between 55 and 60 buses.
Oh, great. I was close.
Yep. Yep.
So while we're talking about replacement, Anne-Marie, like how much use does a bus get? When do we decide to replace typically?
I mean, I think the average is 8 years. We don't do 8 years. We do closer to 10 to 12 years. And that's a testament to just keeping them in good working condition. We are lucky enough to have a bus garage that has an indoor area that buses can get parked in. That really does make a big difference when it comes to the exterior of the buses. So, we do the best we can and to keep them as long as we can without replacing.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide. And then Proposition 4 is what we began this webinar about, would be the capital project. The total capital project is $49,950,000. And we spoke about building aid. So our building aid ratio for this is 67.1%. What that means is we get reimbursed by the state in building aid for 67% of the total cost. So this is the most economical way to get major facility upgrades done in a school district. And we did, there is a section on our website devoted directly for Capital Project 2024. There's also one for 2021, which is the current project. So we are putting all that information in. So if you review it and you have questions, you can email Matt or myself, and we can, if we can't answer it, we'll definitely ask Perry and Jesse to help us out with that. So we tried to put as much information on the website as possible. We will include that capital project information in the budget newsletter as well, just so people are aware before they go to vote on May 21st. Next slide, please.
So we're just wrapping up. We really feel like the budget we're putting forward supports our students as well as that capital project that we discussed at the beginning. So we're excited to put these things in front of everyone. We're trying to do our best to inform folks. Really, thank you for being on tonight. As many people know, I live here in Beacon. I'm a parent in the district. I really try to think through, I'm not perfect, but I try to think through the things the district needs with all the folks I work with and our Board of Ed. And so we're excited to put these things in front of everyone. The last thing I'll mention that's on the ballot is also just the vote for board members. So we don't, in city school districts like Beacon, people don't have to turn in their petitions to enable them to run until May 1st. So we don't know who's running until then. But once that gets submitted, then we send all that information out to the community. If there is more than, there's 3 open seats this year. If there are more than 3 people running, I've been hearing that the community will create some sort of candidate forum. So once that's decided in very early May, we'll put that out so people, if they are interested in attending that, can attend. But other than that, thank you so much for being here. And again, if we didn't answer your question the way you wanted, or if you have any additional questions after this, just email us and we're happy to get back to you as quick as we can. So I'll just wait a second. I think we're good on the Q&A. And oh, hold on. We have one last one here. Oh, it's just a thank you. And I'll thank you back for being here. And we have the May 2nd at Beacon Rec at 6 o'clock, and May 6th at 4:30 at Howland Library. Those are in person. And then May 7th, the board has their own public hearing for the budget, and that is at Beacon High School. All right, talk to you later. Thank you.